Well, hey, thanks, man.
And
Nice to meet you.
you too.
This is a really cool topic and project and mission that you started. I bumped up against this and became aware of food waste, insecurity this past year, kind of in my face in a good way. And so I'm really stoked to hear how you got going and the effectiveness that you've been having, because I'll just say off the start, I'd love to see how I can help you and push this mission forward, because it's a really big deal. So
Thank
thanks for jumping on.
No, thank you. I appreciate all those words.
Let's just go through that little, with challenges become opportunity situation where you're in school, COVID happens, and then boom.
Yeah.
How did this all happen, and why food, and how did you organize that?
I mean, I can preface by saying I had no background in agriculture or freight or, I'd grown up volunteering at food banks, but that was it. We didn't know what we were doing. We just got sent home from school, and it really felt like to myself and then the other co-founder, James Knopf, that there was, as well as some of the other early members like Ben Collier and Will Collier and Jordan Hartzell, we all sort of felt like we were just getting this huge influx of bad news at the time. All we could do is just sit in our houses and look at our phones and hear about the next horrible thing that was happening, and couldn't do anything about it, couldn't help in any way. So it started with, me, on like my 10th night in a row, just sitting in bed, reading articles and feeling more and more depressed. I read an article about supply chain breakdowns and farmers having to throw out all of their food that they were going to send to like schools and business parks. And when the contracts got, suddenly slashed, and you're seeing photos of like mountains of potatoes and mountains of produce and eggs being thrown into the ground. And that same day, I had spoken to a food bank that I grew up volunteering at in Los Angeles, that was saying that they had gone from 300 families a week to like 1,300 families a week, and they're running out of food. So initially, it was just this connection of like, those seem like two problems that could probably solve each other. One has too much food and they don't know what to do with, and the other doesn't have enough. So it was in the beginning, like, let's just see if we can connect these in and around LA and get it to the food bank that in Santa Monica that I grew up at.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking like a country of people here too, so it's it's exciting from that point of view. And also, I think what you spoke on, which I don't want to throw under the rug or miss it, in that you did something really powerful. Aside from what you did, you started learning, you started reading, you started educating yourself, then you started connecting dots, and then you started taking action. So regardless of what people are doing right now, there is a world in which they can contribute to the world and not just sit back on the heels and hope that this pandemic solves itself, which clearly it's not. And it's clearly, all over the place in terms of its challenges. So I just want to say kudos to you, because it's an easy spiral that can pull people down into kind of oblivion, and not kind of lift yourself up and find a solution. So number one, taking action on that should be applauded. So I just want to say thank you for doing that, because that's and you're supposed to finish college. You're just like, the whole freaking thing just got thrown up in the air. And then seeing those two big scenarios where we're literally throwing food away and there's literally people needing it. And that's the astonishing thing, that people, I mean, COVID or not, it's absolutely happening all over the place. So how did you go from connecting a couple dots to be like, wow, this is an opportunity to really get some people and resources behind this?
I think, I think we did ourselves a favor by recognizing like what we didn't know, and just by breaking it down. There's such big issues that if we started with the goal of let's move food in all 50 states, let's move giant 40,000 pound 40,000 like trucks with 40,000 pounds of produce, we would have never gotten off the ground. We started with just like the line in the beginning was like, let's just do one truck, one farm, one food bank, because we might not know anything about anything right now, but I bet we could figure that out. And then when we get that, let's go for a second, and then let's go for a third. And so that's how we parceled it out at the beginning. And that made things more simple. Let's start with Los Angeles, and then, we're going to need to fundraise. So let's make a website. And then maybe to get people the website, we'll make an Instagram and put the message out there. And then when we did that, turns out there's a whole hell of a lot more people, not just people our age, but all sorts of people who wanted to help in the ways that they could. So, 2 weeks in, I think the positive message of us just doing what we could really started to resonate with people. And we got mentioned in a New York Times article. And then suddenly we had like hundreds and then thousands of emails of people saying, hey, can I come help volunteer? Hey, I have a truck. Can I help drive this produce for you? I have a vegetable farm at my house. Do you want to take some of this? And that's when it got very real. And we were like, okay, maybe we can turn this into like a movement as opposed to just a project.
Yeah, well, that's how do you not celebrate the human spirit when it comes to that stuff? Because it's like when it's very clearly defined, there's a need and there's an opportunity to fill that need. And it's literally just a system breakdown. That's what I'm kind of infinitely aware of as I look at almost, this is an oversimplification, but as I look at all of the issues in the world, it's really systems that are failing it. So like in this instance, as you know, we actually have more than enough food to feed everybody on the planet, plus a few other billion that aren't here yet, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the like, wait a minute, like that's a clear failure. I'm so curious. The first farmer that you connected with, who was in the one hand needing to destroy their food because there was no outlet for it, and then you coming in saying, no, I have a place for that in this food bank. So talk to me about that situation when you went to that farmer and what that was like in order to then deliver it to the food bank. What was viscerally, like, describe to me what that had to be an amazing feeling.
Well, it was what you're talking about, of it just being this system breakdown. I thought absolutely once we got a farmer on the phone who had surplus food, there would be like a million miles of red tape and we needed to have this form and this legality and this thing and that thing in order to get the food moved. But it was as simple as like, once we got someone on the phone who was a farmer out in Van Nuys, who ran a warehouse that a bunch of eggs into Los Angeles would get moved through. He was like, yeah, I've got them. You can have them because I'm going to throw them out, but I have no way of getting them to you. So we were like, it's that simple, really? And then the second delivery we did was a whole truckload of onions from this farmer, Shay Myers, who we still work with up in Oregon. And it was the same thing. He was like, yeah, I'm throwing out millions of pounds of these every day. And I'm putting it on TikTok. I'm putting it on YouTube. I'm telling people this is happening. And, the food banks close to me are all filled up. I want people to have them. I don't want to throw these out. So we figured out how to get a truck from there down to California or down to Los Angeles. It was like, so what I'm saying here is it was like a shock at the beginning. It was, I think growing up, I always had this idea that these systems were way more impenetrable and way more complex than maybe they actually were. And it just took reaching out and talking to someone, being like, what's your problem and how can we help solve that? And that's still what we do. And all the student volunteers we have, that's like their opening line every time they get on the phone.
Yeah, I love that. And it goes to show if you don't do anything about it, nothing changes, right? Mm-hmm. And if you actually put some intelligence and energy into something, anything is solvable, right?
Mhm.
And this is, and I love the fact that you just did it anyway, and getting those kind of first wins got to feel really good. So let's define a little bit, like, what is the definition? Because there's food waste, there's the environment, and we're going to get into all of that, but
Mhm.
there's people literally without food, right? And
Yeah.
we can see them all over LA begging for food and money and everything else. So there's people without food, and then there's people that don't know where the food's going to come from, how they're going to get it. So describe to me and to our listeners what food insecurity is. What are the parameters of that?
Yeah. And it can be such a sort of convoluted term when you say all these millions of people are food insecure. It's like, what does that mean? I know what hungry means.
Yeah.
Food insecure, essentially, the definition means you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You may have the means to put food on the table, but you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you're having to scrape together, nickels and dimes to feed your family. And that is why it's insecure. It's an insecurity in the sense that you might know what's, going to be on the table for Tuesday and what your three kids are going to eat, but not Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And you don't know how you're going to get the money to get that.
Right.
And if one thing were to happen, one thing were to go wrong, like we've seen a billion times in this last year, if you had a sudden layoff, if you had a sickness in the family, then you might not be prepared to handle that, and your family could go hungry. And that's a dramatic scenario that we're seeing, 40% of Americans deal with right now. So it is not
For 40%. And is
about
that
yeah.
40%? Has that gone up obviously since COVID too?
Yeah, it is spiked. And in dealing with these issues, it's always an interesting thing when I find myself like naming statistics, things like 20 billion pounds of food going to waste, 1/3 of all food grown going to waste, 54 million Americans, things like that, which are very big numbers, but they're extremely hard to visualize and extremely hard to personalize and understand, even for me. So, it was important, even though we were, in the pandemic and to be at home, for us to get our volunteers to go out to their local food bank and volunteer and help. Because that's when you actually get to understand what we're doing. When you see, a line of 1,000 families around the block, and these are people who look just like you and me, because they are just like you and me. Um, that's a humbling experience, and it kind of puts yourself more in touch with what you're doing if you're volunteering for the Farmlink Project, because so much of that can end up just you being behind a phone or behind a screen. So we want people to go at least once a month to go and help actually pass out the food themselves and provide that like physical volunteer work.
Well, that's a very important aspect, I think, to all work. Almost, if you can have an inner connectedness to what you're doing and the effect that it's having. And with this day and age and digitalization, it's harder and harder to do that. But the human spirit of being able to literally change someone's life in a gnarly time, that you can't judge someone at the time, because any one of us, that could be us, right?
Yeah.
And then having COVID and all of these other things just give this unprecedented other angle, can just take someone out who felt somewhat secure in their paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, they don't have it. And so, but I think I resonate with that, because the blue collar, like, I like to work, like, I like to get my hands dirty. I like to, like, coming from Minnesota, my families were farmers and all of this stuff. So I appreciate that. And especially linking up the farmer to a new system of not literally just wasting the food.
Yeah.
So, there's so many things that go off in my head just thinking about this. And one is, it's like, on the one hand, I'm so happy that you created this situation, because I literally had it because of the past year. I can't tell you exactly what project I was involved with that presented this project in another country that I was seeing that was effective in terms of this food waste. And I was like, we need to do this. We need to do this in the US. We need to. So when Raven put me in touch with you guys, I was like, oh my God, these guys are cranking. And so on the one hand, I get a little pissed off, right? Not so much anymore, because I see the failure of big government. I see the failure of systems. That, like, why is this even a thing, right? Why aren't we putting resources? So the point is, like, at a certain point, I stop asking why. It's ineffective. It's just not being done, right? So we, as in this case, Americans, and seeing a problem, you just do it and get it done. And I think that's the epitome of sovereignty, is the epitome of our freedom to be able to, like, listen, this is a problem, this is a solution, let's create a new system, right? And if I think nothing speaks to that more than right freaking now. We are seeing failures across the board of all kinds of things, but we have to literally create the world that we want to see. And I praise that in what you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, you can get really tired of hearing about all the failures. And some of them are much bigger, much more complex than others, but it is exhausting to just hear about it and feel like you can't do anything about it. And I'm 23 years old. I don't really know what I'm doing or what I'm talking about, but I do know that going forward in the future, anytime there's an instance like this, you just have to start, and you just have to find the people who care about it in the way that you do, because then something is going to happen. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, then you can maybe maneuver from there and figure out how. Right. And I'm a huge proponent of that. And if you can find that right message, it's amazing what I've learned in terms of the types of people that will come and help you if they resonate with the message that you have.
Dude, but that humble nature, the humility of what you just said, the passion, the purpose dwarfs any need for skills, because you'll figure those out as you go, as you getting on the phone, connecting a couple dots, having volunteered. It's like you just figure it out. It's literally not rocket science, but just going into it and doing it and solving this major problem. So let's talk a little bit then on food waste, right?
Okay.
We like I think there was a stat at one point, we have literally enough food right now for 10 billion people on the planet. I know that I'm a plant-based person, but I got to talk to this fish butchery who uses 99% of the fish, and realized that all of our fish being caught, not to mention the horrible waste that's going on in the fishing industry, that 50% of all fish are being discarded and not being used because everyone wants their sashimi the way they want it. So the food waste is a big problem. So around that, how have you started to understand the discrepancy of all the waste, at least in LA and around the country? Like how are you then? It's a systems approach, like getting the food and delivering the food. Talk to me about that and how you're kind of maximizing the food waste problem.
Yeah, food waste is the problem that we are just drilling into, because that is the one that feels, you have these two issues, food waste and food insecurity. They can be linked. One can help the other. But the fact is, food insecurity has a million different reasons why it's occurring. And you can't really look at it and laugh at its absurdity and the fact that it exists, because it is extremely complex as to why people are not getting enough money to have enough food. Food waste, on the other hand, the more and more I've learned about it, talked to these farmers and been to these farms, the more it's like you can't even believe it's it's real. You can just laugh at it in a terrible way, because it's just a product of this kind of visibility that we have into our food system. And the fact that, I'm taking words out of one of our farm partners' mouth right now, but it's a product of the fact that the American consumer really wants and needs a perfect looking, watermelon sitting right there on their shelf 12 months of the year. And that convenience is worth more than anything to us. And we reflect that through the purchasing decisions we make, which then climb up the ladder to the decisions the farmers have to make. So I'll give an example. 2 weeks ago, I went to a warehouse down in East Los Angeles. And this was about the length of a football field. It was about 100 yards by 50 yards wide, but stacked about 50 feet tall with crates that had heirloom tomatoes in it. Like this expensive, nice produce, but they were all going to be thrown out because they were too red for the shelves. Yeah, it was something like 200,000 pounds. And that was just for that was just for that morning. Those were supposed to be cleared out by 10 a.m. for the next load to come in to get shipped off and thrown away. And that's what we see: too red, too small. We all kind of have heard about this imperfect produce issue, but it's a variety of factors. It's seasonal changes as the climate is becoming more and more unpredictable. The weather's too hot or too cold, and you grow more or less than you need. And there's always going to be overproduction at the farm level, which is what we're focused on. 20 billion pounds a year of produce going to waste in the United States. There always is going to be overproduction just by nature of farmers having to grow more than they expect so they can always meet their quotas. The problem I'm seeing here, though, that we're looking at is that extra 5% or 10%, there's no avenue for it right now from the farm level. There aren't enough. Like we're doing it, but we can't handle all of it right now. We need a much more coordinated effort on trying to get that 20 billion pounds of food into the hands of people who need it, because there are a lot of people who would really enjoy an heirloom tomato, a fresh watermelon,
So because it's sad and laughable, the fact that we've, I have this term fatal convenience, right? This is an absolute fatal convenience that we want it to look a certain way. And then we literally won't accept it if it isn't perfect. And then at the same time, we have all these people not getting food, and we're just willing to throw it all away and not allow those people to eat. So it's just, I've picked from food that was being thrown away as well. And I'm literally going, what the hell is wrong with this? Like, I'm eating it going, how are you throwing this beautiful, in your case, too red of an amazing heirloom tomato? How the hell can we be so insanely insane to think that is any sort of, and then to not have like let's say COVID, fine, like it's like they naturally have a buffer of overproduction, right? So that itself is going to solve the food insecurity thing. So the fact that we don't have a system in place in a massive scale to provide for our own people is, again, what are we doing? Right?
Yeah. And what kind of fits into the vision here is that there is a food banking system in the United States that does a whole lot for people. And many of these food banks will source wholesale from farms that are going to waste. They have been doing what we do for a couple of years now, or maybe even a decade or more. Those are the first people we went and spoke to when we started this. We're like, how do we do something that's going to help you guys so that we're not doing something, just redundant and patting ourselves on the back and making mistakes that you guys made 2 decades ago. But what we're focused on is, like, if we can get access to that much stuff, that much fresh produce, and we can provide that produce to organizations that we really believe are doing the right thing with it. So rather than making people wait in a line to get a handout. They, for example, are providing meals with directions on how to use those heirloom tomatoes and that kale, or they're setting up farmers market type situations that are more humanizing for families to go and pick out what they like. That's where I think Farmlink can have the biggest impact, not as this front facing, not so much as this front facing thing, because at the end of the day, a bag of potatoes and broccoli is not going to save a person's life. Or it's not going to make a person or a family feel good. We want to be the back end to provide tons and tons of this stuff to the right organizations who can get, turn that raw stuff into meals and like culture and cultural, culture-based meals and things that make you feel human and alive.
Right. Not just this free stuff that they're given. Now, what the hell do I do with it? But really, I like that approach, like that, like you're really going. So let's break that down. So food banks, what are they? What are they doing? What missing links are they providing? And then what are the other organizations that you're utilizing?
Yeah, we'll see a food bank as like a large institutional warehouse that, let's say, is in Houston, and they are taking in, tens of millions of pounds of food. They have a variety of partners, wholesale partners that they may be buying from, food donations that they're taking, let's say from a supermarket, this and that. They're piling up a ton of food in their main warehouse. And then they have trucks that they distribute out to local food pantries, which are, what you would go to if you needed to grab a bag of produce or like dairy or whatever. You're going to go to a food pantry and you're going to get what you need. And that's basically the system in place. And it works for getting food into people's hands. I mean, you see food banks like in major cities like Houston and Los Angeles and down in Arizona that are moving close to 1 billion pounds of food a year. That being said, where I think we can reimagine this system is the way in which it gets into people's hands. There are organizations like Brighter Bites, for example, that when they get it, they have their warehouses, they have their food, and they have the same ability to distribute that into smaller communities. They're giving you a pamphlet that is with a scannable barcode that tells you exactly how to use that food that maybe you've never gotten at the grocery store before. They're giving you a contact, they're giving you a way to, like, a reason as to why this stuff is healthy, why this stuff is fresh. It's just connecting it and making it more human. So basically, to sum that up, we have a food banking system that is pretty efficient at getting food into people's hands and moving poundage. But what we're really focused on as we scale is like, how do we make this more personal and more human?
And you think the idea of that is how, in your ideal world then, what would be the best way of doing that? Would that literally be an organization and volunteers who are then taking all of the food that you're collecting and preparing meals, and then those meals are being distributed, or boxes, or like how do you see, like, if money wasn't an issue, if anything, what do you believe, now having the experience, what do you believe is the most powerful way to get that to people and actually have them utilize it?
Yeah, I pretty strongly believe in not reinventing the wheel, like especially in this space, being given the fact that we're all working towards the same mission. There is no need to try to do the same thing that another organization may be doing well already, to try to do it instead of them. There's absolutely no need. So our mindset really strongly is like, let's find those ones that are really competent at, let's say, taking food in bulk and turning it into meals, or let's say taking the meals and getting them into people's homes, and let's partner with them and figure out what they need. And most of the time, what we found the value add is that they are not sourcing enough food, and they also are having a difficult time getting it to them. So that's where we sit, is if this is the farm and this is the person's home, and a lot of the organizations are between here and here, we are filling that gap to just be like, you amazing person who have worked with no spotlight for the last 20 years to figure out the system, how to, get fresh meals into everybody's home in Brooklyn. Like, we're going to take this load off of you, and we're going to cover the cost and the convenience of getting all your food sourced to you. And that's what we want to be. And we do that with our volunteers, but we really, this like back end logistics network where we're going to work with 100 farmers. We're working to move 1 billion pounds of food. And we're going to get it to the right avenues. Because at the end of the day, like, what does 1 billion pounds of food mean? What is 40,000 pounds of food? It's about like what you do with it and how people access it.
Right. And so to date, some of those numbers are like something like 40 million pounds you've moved so far?
Yeah, we're about a year in, and we've moved 40 million pounds of food.
In a year. Dude, come on, everyone. We need to, that's freaking amazing. I mean, I just love that. And being though that food is our health, right? And unfortunately, in food scarcity, which is also right in the middle of cities, scarcity, because there's no grocery stores, and I've talked in length with Dan Buettner, the blue zones, and trying to help with that, and other people, into realizing that, man, some of these scenarios and cities are just so poorly created that it keeps people away from healthy food, whether that was planned or whether that was just a result of poor planning. The result is people are not getting fresh food into their mouths, and therefore, further and deeper down the rabbit hole of disease and poor health. So this is the health of this whole thing is of massive importance, and especially now, because we know that the majority of the people even suffering from COVID are obese, right? There's disease and all of that stuff. So talk about that health side of things a little bit.
Yeah, that is such a central part to it. On one end, people in the United States are not getting enough food, but a huge role of what we're doing is about the fact that people in the United States are not getting the right food. And that is because it's expensive. It's hard to access at your local supermarket. Or if you have it, you don't know what to do with it. And it's not as quick and easy as some of the more processed options. And that's why we've never moved anything processed, and we never will. We only work with produce. We have done dairy and eggs, and then some garnishes and things like that. But 99% of it is just fresh, healthy vegetables and fruits. So that, when we're getting it to people, they can get it to their kids, so that their kids have what they need to go to school and be alert during the day. And, it's something a little bit more than like a bag of Doritos to power them throughout the day.
Yeah, some of these kids these days don't even really know what fresh food is anymore. They're not even exposed to it.
There was a really, really good, also it was also a New York Times article, but it was a photojournalism piece of what we're talking about looks like, and it just documented families all throughout the Midwest and the South and the East Coast, who depended on food banks and depended on the charitable food system and depended on food stamps. And, it's basically like, you're seeing kids who had just had, 8-hour school days on Zoom, are eating like a bag of Doritos and a cookie, or, at best, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and like chocolate pretzels, because that's just what was available. And not a lot of it either. So just these sort of empty calories that, the research backs up of how many negative effects that has on you over the years, in terms of your mental development, in terms of your emotional stability, and your physical development, of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we're starting to see those numbers of heart disease in 10-year-olds. I mean, it's just astronomically incredible. And it's silent. It's invisible. We don't see it. And so we keep these kids, and they're like, oh, they're kids. The problem is that we're creating these habits that it's going to be so damaging and so difficult for them to break later. And
Mhm.
so it's flippant conversations like that. It's just kids, they're fine. It's a horrible excuse. So I love the fact that you're getting fresh food to people. So let's just take a scenario like, how can people access food banks? Can anyone go up there? Do they have to have a special status, income status? Like, how does that work? If, like, let's say all of a sudden I lose my check, I lose my job, I literally have no idea, my family is there. How do I get access to this food?
Yeah, yeah. It varies. It varies from institution to institution, but the simple answer is the best thing for you to do if you are someone who needs assistance, food assistance, is find your local food pantry and work with that community center there, because they're going to be the ones who are going to give you the right answers and the right guidance to see how you get what you get. And sometimes it does require paperwork and signing up for it. But most of the times you're talking with people who are volunteering their time because they care about this situation at hand, they care about the community, and they want to help you. So that is the best thing to do, is to go to look up your local food pantry and try to get a face-to-face interview with someone who works there. More times than not, you're gonna be able to walk in maybe same day and get a bag of what you need. But if not, at the very least, you're gonna get a resource who's gonna point you in the right direction.
Right. Great. Yeah. And so, there's so many tentacles of this thing that are just so impressive and so necessary. And one thing that people don't realize with the food waste, and that's the environmental impact. Oh my God, right? So the third largest contributor of greenhouse gases in our environment is literally rotting food waste.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, people just don't realize, and the fact that if we care about our environment, we would literally be solving this for this alone, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you could just, any one of these pillars that we've talked about,
Yeah.
that is worth its weight in gold, right?
Yeah.
Every one of them, from the environment to the health to food insecurity to all of these things. But now this greenhouse gases, if you want to, like, you're literally creating a scenario where we're gobbling up the waste of that's contributing to the environment. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that, and what are some of your numbers that you've also now contributed to?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know this. I didn't know the role that food waste played in emissions and climate change. In fact, I didn't even know it until about 6 months into working on Farmlink. But did I connect with the fact of, oh my God, every time we reroute a truck of potatoes from going to the landfill, we're saving X thousand pounds of methane and carbon dioxide from going to the atmosphere. Once we realized that, it became this like core focus of ours, because all of us, I speak for everybody who works on Farmlink, and then so many people who don't, and so many people who aren't really aware or care so much about food waste, but do care about the environment. Like, that is the common link here. Something we were talking about earlier in this conversation was this idea of gigantic issues and not knowing where to start, and that being an overwhelming feeling. That's the issue of climate change at hand right now, is that there's 50 million factors to it, and vast majority of people do not want to see it occur, do not like what's happening and how it's getting worse, and they definitely don't like their feeling of impotence against it, but they don't know where to start. And like, giving their dollar to this organization, or recycling their bottles a bit more during the week, just doesn't quite feel like they're having an impact. So that's what I really like about zeroing in here, is that food waste plays a huge role in degradation of the climate, and we can actually fix that. And if we do, we're making an impact on about 25% of emissions from the United States. So we've removed 40 million pounds of carbon dioxide and methane from the atmosphere by saving them from going to the landfill. That's been our impact.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And that, it's like compounding interest, right? You set yourself on this, start with one farmer, one truck, one place to distribute it, and then it just keeps going and going. That one truck is 1,000 pounds of CO2 that's not being emitted, and it's, hundreds of people now have food, and it just keeps going and going and going. And that's how these things have to be solved. And I also like the idea of, some people can't get their head around climate change, period. But I look at this stuff as, it's common sense. It's common sense to get food that you have to people that don't. And in that process, you're not wasting food that's destroying the environment. It's all of it is common sense, but we just need to put time and energy and create this new system. And that's what I really love about what you're doing. So how can I know, because, from season 1 of Down to Earth, I probably had thousands and thousands of people from 12 to 30 who all were saying, I want to help. I want to contribute to something. I'm inspired. I wasn't even thinking about some of this stuff. And this fits right into that category. This is how people can help, and they can donate. They can go to their cities, their regions, their states, and they can probably help mobilize more and more outputs and inputs and support for you. So how can people, what are the different ways, and I really want to know this, what are the different ways people can help you and contribute to you?
This is what you can do. We take everybody and anybody who wants to help, whether you have an hour a week where you want to contact farms, or you have 40 hours a week where you want to lead a team of people, or you have no time, but you have $10, which is going to move 200 pounds of produce to people who need it.
Wow.
All of those opportunities through our website, farmlinkproject.org. Get involved. We have things called power hours where you come in and you basically join a group of people for an hour, a group of our team members, in calling our partner farms and seeing if they have any surplus that we can move. We have a Farmlink fellowship that's going on right now for people who actually want to join the team, in which case I would say reach out to me personally, aidan.reilly@farmlinkproject.org. And then if you don't have time to give, but if you have $1 or if you have $10, that we stretch that 100%. 100% of individual donations goes towards moving food. It always has and always will. If you give your $1, none of it is going to go to overhead or salary or anything like that. It's going to be used to pay truckers and to get food to food banks.
Amazing, dude. Like, I am so stoked. You're going to have a hard time stopping me from not helping you guys. So
You should come on to a power hour. You basically get on and you try your hand at calling farmers and basically do what we've been doing all year.
I'd love to do that. Plus, I'm stoked of hearing $100 gives 1,000 pounds of food.
To put it simply, every $1 is 20 pounds of food. Those are the margins we're working at with the farms. As we've worked, we found more and more farms that have been not just throwing out food, but having to pay to throw out their food. They're having to pay regulations, pay workers to break it down, which means that we're finding partner farms who are just happily going to give us that food, huge amounts on a weekly donation basis, which means we're looking at $1, 20 pounds of food. If you give $10 right now, we're going to use that to get 200 pounds of food to people in Louisiana who need it.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to challenge everyone who's listening to this right now, everyone who tunes into this podcast, donate something. As a rubber meets the road person, I'm donating $1,000 because I want 20,000 pounds to go to people and their mouths, because I'm so stoked about this. So as soon as I get off there, I'm putting $1,000 in. And I challenge all of you, $1, 10, 100, 1,000. Come on, let's do this. Let's get people food, and let's stop wasting food that's ripping apart our ozone layer. It's ridiculous, doesn't make sense. It's not common sense. And Farmlink has created an amazing solution here in the United States. And dude, I'm just number one, I'm stoked that you've done it, because I was wanting to, like, someone's got to do this, and I was starting to chomp at the bit. So I'm really excited that you have done a lot of the heavy lifting, and now I can just kind of surf a little bit on
that. And you are welcome, please.
Well, cool, man. Well, where can people find you? Let's just give all the links again.
Yeah, so farmlinkproject.org is our website, and basically all of our handles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, is Farmlink Project, one word.
Great. Aidan, you're a superhero. I appreciate all of the people that work for you, work with you, all the farmers, all of the volunteers. I applaud all of you, and let's get healthy food to as many people as possible.
Hey, thank you, Darin.
Thanks, brother.